I've previously been employed as a registered nurse in several hospitals and care centers. Prior to my current position, I was at a geriatric facility located a 30-minute drive from my residence. I already possessed experience in caring for elderly patients, so this environment was familiar. My tenure at this particular hospital was brief, lasting only a few weeks, and the reason will soon become clear. This incident occurred during what turned out to be my penultimate shift. Unbeknownst to me as that night began, I was scheduled for the overnight shift and was severely sleep-deprived. My assignment was to the Alzheimer's ward. The patients there seemed to genuinely appreciate my company. As a young woman in my 20s, my presence among the residents, who were often left to their own internal worlds, likely provided a welcome change, a connection to the present, to the everyday. When individuals are isolated, their minds can wander, but with another person present, they are anchored to the current moment. I attended to several patients that evening, but one, named Lena, was particularly agitated. It was my first time caring for her, and she repeatedly spoke of hearing voices and seeing a man dressed in black in the corner of her room. The other occupant of her room had requested her curtain to be drawn before my shift commenced, hoping Lena would leave her in peace. This other woman was pleasant and smiled in my presence, but she was quiet and quite forgetful. Given that my shift began around 9 p.m., most patients were asleep by 11 p.m., but Lena was an exception. Whenever she summoned me, she expressed fear of these alleged voices and the man in black who continually stared at her from the room's corner. Honestly, it was somewhat unsettling. I acknowledged that she was genuinely perceiving these things in her mind, and I empathized with her, imagining how frightening it must be. Nevertheless, I endeavored to reassure her and encourage her to sleep. I refrained from turning on the television to calm her, out of consideration for the other patient in the room. I grasped Lena's hands and reassured her that it was safe to breathe and unwind. I reminded her of my presence, emphasizing that she was not alone and that I was readily available if needed. This strategy seemed effective. Lena calmed down for a period, and when I next checked on her, she was asleep. Once most, if not all, of the patients are asleep, the night's pace decelerates significantly. Time seems to move in reverse. An hour or two later, I was in the linen room replenishing my supply cart. It was a compact, utterly silent room, and I had closed the door. Therefore, any additional noise was unexpected. I turned, saw nothing, and resumed my task. Then, I distinctly felt what seemed like a hand on my shoulder. I glanced at my shoulder, reacted with a jump and a cry, but there was nothing there. No one else was in the room, yet I was certain I had felt something substantial grasp my shoulder. I stepped into the hallway momentarily, peering around. No other nurses were visible, it was completely quiet. I had no choice but to continue my work. I proceeded to fill the cart, and upon turning towards the door, I collapsed to the floor, screaming, my heart pounding in my chest. A man dressed in black stood outside, peering through the glass, a smile on his face. My cries were loud enough to rouse the entire ward. The man vanished from view through the door's glass window. Moments later, the door opened, and a colleague came to assist me, finding me in a state of hysteria. I inquired if she had seen the man in black, but her reply was, "What man? There's no one else here." We inspected all the rooms in the ward, no one matching that description was found. My outburst awoke Lena from what must have been a light sleep. When I entered her room, she began to mention the voices again, this time including the screams, unaware that they were mine. I questioned her about the appearance of the man in black, asking if he was smiling. Her eyebrows furrowed, her expression shifting to the most focused I had witnessed all day. She inquired, "How did you know?" and even with my heart still racing, I felt a skipped beat at her words. She then began screaming, "Get me out of here. He's coming." The other nurses arrived to try and calm her. I was reassigned to a different ward that night, and I ultimately went home early due to my heightened anxiety. The following day, I texted the head nurse, informing her that my subsequent shift would be my last, explaining that the experience had been traumatic and that I no longer felt comfortable in that building. I received as understanding a response as I could have hoped for. I have never received any diagnosis, nor have I ever experienced hallucinations of any sort. I am cognizant of the effects of sleep deprivation, but this was extraordinary. I cannot say for certain if my mind began to deceive me based on Lena's repeated descriptions, but the sensation of the hand on my shoulder, the visual of the smiling man behind the glass door, matching the description a patient provided numerous times, this was an instance of an unexplainable, supernatural event. At least, I sincerely hope it was a singular occurrence. Before proceeding to the subsequent narrative, I wish to express my gratitude to Guardio for sponsoring this video. Incidents like those recounted on this channel underscore the necessity of maintaining vigilance in your surroundings. However, many individuals spend a considerable portion of their time online, making it equally crucial to be vigilant regarding your safety while browsing the internet. Guardio is a user-friendly browser extension that, simply stated, safeguards you from scams and identity theft, enabling you to engage in online activities without apprehension. By utilizing Guardio, you will secure your online browsing and personal data, prevent the installation of malware, avoid becoming a victim of scams, and receive instantaneous alerts on any device if your information is potentially compromised. Everyone has encountered hazardous and intrusive pop-ups while surfing the web. Guardio will promptly block any sites and providers that transmit malvertising pop-ups, allowing you to browse serenely. Being a YouTuber entails spending numerous hours working online, so I was not entirely surprised when Guardio revealed all the existing threats on my system. Currently, Guardio is extending a special offer to my viewers, a 20% discount on the monthly subscription when using my link. Therefore, if you desire a secure and uncluttered browsing experience, navigate to guard.io/Mr. Nightmare, link in the description, and explore their cost-effective premium plan for comprehensive protection. Music. 3 years prior, I was diagnosed with bacterial meningitis. Residing in South Florida, I am unaware of any ongoing outbreak at the time, leaving me uncertain as to how or from whom I contracted it. I began exhibiting severe symptoms, intense headaches, disorientation, drowsiness, nausea, and a loss of appetite. However, it was the onset of hallucinations that signaled the seriousness of my condition. While confined to bed with illness, and my husband away at work, I distinctly heard a child's voice calling "Mom" from the lower level of our home. We have no children. I managed to pull myself out of bed to look down the staircase and call out my husband's name. Naturally, there was no response, as he was at work. The headache intensified upon standing, forcing me back to bed. A second time, I heard a voice call from downstairs, this time saying, "Hello." I reached for my phone and contacted my husband, frantically explaining that I was hearing a disturbing child's voice within the house and believed I was hallucinating. He perceived my distress and promptly left work to take me to the hospital. While awaiting his arrival, I changed out of my sleepwear. During this process, I had to rush to the bathroom to vomit. In the midst of this, I heard another voice from outside the bathroom. I could not discern what was said, nor could I determine if it resembled the previous voice. I felt as though I was losing my grip on reality. My diagnosis was not confirmed until I reached the hospital, where I learned that, if left untreated, my condition could be extremely serious, even life-threatening. The doctor informed me that hallucinations, while uncommon, were not unprecedented in such cases. I was promptly administered antibiotics intravenously. The doctor emphasized my fortunate timing in seeking medical attention, stating that a significant delay could have resulted in lasting consequences or even fatality. My husband remained with me for several hours in the hospital room, where I was informed I would need to stay for several days to a week, depending on the severity of my symptoms. Around 10 p.m., my husband departed for home, as he had work the following day. The nurse instructed me to call her if I encountered any problems. Despite feeling utterly wretched, I managed to fall asleep relatively quickly. I then experienced a dream in which my ex-husband was present in the room, leaning over my bed, speaking to me. He uttered disparaging remarks about my current husband. He patted my head, expressing relief that I was all right and claiming he had come immediately upon learning of my husband's departure. He launched into a tirade about his disdain for my current husband and his desire to harm him. He continued to rub my forehead before exiting the room. I frequently have unpleasant dreams involving my ex-husband due to the toxic and abusive nature of our marriage and the circumstances of its termination, details I prefer not to divulge. I awoke in a groggy, light-headed state and surveyed the room. A chair had been positioned in front of my hospital bed, but it was unoccupied. This was not the arrangement when my husband had left. It was still the middle of the night, so I returned to sleep. I awoke the next morning to find the nurse in my room. I recounted the unusually vivid dream I had experienced. She left and subsequently informed me that it had not been a dream. My cousin had visited me the previous night. I informed her that I have no cousins residing in the state. Her expression became more serious, and she stated that someone claiming to be my cousin, David, had visited me late last night. David was the name of my ex-husband. After further clarification, the nurse summoned a doctor. The doctor explained that the antibiotics might have induced delirium, impairing my ability to distinguish between sleep and wakefulness, thus explaining my vivid perception of David's words. I contacted my husband to relay the events, and understandably, he was both furious and worried. He returned that evening after work. However, earlier that day, I texted David, demanding an explanation for his visit and inquiring how he knew of my hospitalization. My message was delivered, but he ignored it. I sent a follow-up message, stating that I had heard all of his threats towards my husband and that I would involve law enforcement. Minutes later, he responded, denying any threats and claiming he had only visited to ensure my well-being upon learning of my condition, suggesting I must have misheard things in my sleep. I replied, instructing him to stay out of my life or I would, again, involve the police. He did not respond after this. I never disclosed the threats I perceived in my drowsy, half-asleep state to my husband, as I was uncertain of their validity. Considering the combination of antibiotics and my previous experience with auditory hallucinations, I deemed it plausible that what I heard was not an accurate reflection of what was said, though I could not be certain. I was discharged from the hospital the following week. Music. I once connected with a woman named Francesca on Tinder, with whom I remain friends. She appeared intriguing from the outset. She had a full sleeve of tattoos on her left arm, red streaks in her hair, and her profile indicated a passion for fitness. One of her photographs was taken on the rooftop of an intriguing building with an impressive view. I inquired about its location, and she revealed it was an abandoned hospital on the outskirts of town, known for being fascinating to explore at night and relatively easy to access. She mentioned there was typically a single police officer patrolling the expansive parking lot at night to discourage trespassers, but she claimed it was easily avoidable. She proposed the idea of us visiting the hospital together as our first informal meeting, if one could call it a date. I was entirely receptive to the suggestion. She seemed engaging, and it presented a unique and unconventional way to meet someone, in contrast to the typical, let's grab drinks, scenario. I picked her up from her residence, a 10-minute drive away, and we then proceeded on the 20-minute journey to the hospital. This 20-minute drive provided a valuable opportunity to become acquainted and comfortable with each other's personalities. Upon arriving at the hospital, she instructed me to park on a cul-de-sac concealed by a cluster of tall bushes, a 5-minute walk from the hospital's interior. We navigated a small barrier separating the road from the hospital parking lot and then briskly crossed the expansive lot towards the grassy area adjacent to the entrance she typically used. She guided us to a damaged window leading to the hospital's basement. It appeared somewhat eerie, but I had willingly agreed to this. I was relieved I had worn worn-out jeans, as she had advised, anticipating they might tear on something. We utilized our phone flashlights. We had not brought any specialized, high-intensity lighting. She appeared to know this entire hospital intimately. She directed us to the staircase leading to the upper levels. I must admit, being alone with just one other person in such a location at night was quite unsettling, but I was unaware of how much more frightening it was about to become. On the first floor, Francesca's voice was so loud that I nearly cautioned her to be quieter. I was apprehensive that we would be discovered due to her volume. Along the corridor we were traversing, we heard a sound, like a door opening or closing. Something reverberated down the hallway towards us. She perceived it as well and fell silent. I inquired in a whisper whether it was common for others to be present, and she replied, "Sometimes, but not really." We extinguished our flashlights and waited. Abruptly, there was a loud bang, much closer to us this time. We both hurried in the darkness, I following her with difficulty, barely able to see. We reached the stairway and ascended the stairs with our lights reactivated. Once we were several levels higher, we deemed it safe to converse at a normal volume. Francesca stated that the police never entered the building, so it might have been other explorers. However, the peculiar aspect was the absence of any other light source in that corridor. No one in their right mind would navigate in complete darkness. Then, we heard sounds emanating from the exit stairwell we had just vacated. Someone was ascending the stairs. Once again, we hastened, she leading the way, claiming knowledge of where to go. We traversed this labyrinthine building for several minutes. I was genuinely frightened. It felt as though we were being pursued, and I was unsure whether I would prefer it to be the police or someone else. She guided us to a small exterior area. We were not on the highest rooftop, but I suppose we were on what could be termed the rooftop of this particular level. We paused to regain our composure. The sensation of being followed had completely dampened the mood. Even she appeared apprehensive, and I had considered her the expert in this environment. After a few minutes, we calmed down somewhat and entered through a broken window into the ceiling area of a large room. This segment was particularly unnerving because she proposed walking along these lengthy, slender wooden planks, with a 10-foot drop below. A fall from this height would undoubtedly result in injury, but I did not wish to appear cowardly. I followed her across the precarious, elongated wooden board until we reached the top of a pillar where one board terminated and another commenced. We sat upon this pillar to simply relax and converse, our legs suspended over the edge, overlooking the darkness beneath. It was a creepy atmosphere, and I believed we were entirely alone until a sound arose from below. It resembled someone walking. Our presence had already been revealed to whoever was down there, so we activated our flashlights and directed them downwards. Directly below us, standing at the base of the pillar and gazing upwards, was a man in his 40s, sporting a black Carhartt beanie, a black jacket, and black sweatpants. He smiled at us and, in a chillingly deep voice, uttered, "Come on down," while gesturing for us to descend. I inquired, "Are you police?" He ignored my question as if he hadn't heard it, and repeated, "Come on down," with his unsettling smile. Francesca and I stood up, frightened, and began retracing our steps across the narrow wooden plank. I was now even more terrified of falling than before. I had no inkling of what that man might do to us. As we were approximately halfway across, the man swiftly exited the room below through a doorway. He was undoubtedly intending to intercept us. We had to expedite our movements. We successfully crossed and endeavored to escape, recognizing that the man posed a danger. As we descended the stairs in the stairwell on the opposite side of the hospital, we heard the door a few flights above us open and slam shut, followed by the sound of footsteps pounding down the stairs. He had somehow managed to follow us. We were sprinting as though our lives depended on it. We reached the first floor and hurried back to the opposite side of the hospital, where we had entered. We returned to the basement and clambered through the broken window. The entire process of climbing through that window was agonizing, as I exited second and feared my legs would be grasped at any moment. However, I believe we had eluded the man by that point. We ran back across the parking lot to my vehicle, and upon reaching it, our immediate actions were to lock the doors and regain our composure. It had been a complete nightmare, and somehow, navigating it together had forged an instantaneous bond between us. We departed from that location and stopped at a Wendy's to acquire food and simply gather our thoughts in the car. We remained there for an hour, conversing, and then I dropped her off. Francesca and I have maintained contact over the years, and while we were romantically involved for a brief period, we ultimately remained close friends. Neither of us ever returned to that abandoned hospital.